Australian Department of Defence's ambitious program to extend the life of its 6 Collins-class submarines has been dramatically scaled back after a decade of mismanagement, costing taxpayers nearly $700 million without producing a workable design. The life of type extension, known as LOTE, was originally meant to replace major propulsion and power systems, so the aging boats could remain capable for an extra decade, while Australia waited for its future nuclear-powered submarines under AUKUS. According to the Australian National Audit Office, Defence spent approximately $693 million on design and procurement activities before finally abandoning the scope of the original plan in May 2026. In its place, the government approved a far more modest strategy to refurbish and retain the existing systems, rather than replace them entirely. Critics like defence analyst Michael Shoebridge argue that this leaves the fleet dangerously dependent on standard maintenance to keep it combat-ready well into the 2030s and beyond. At the heart of the failed original plan was a decision to install new propulsion and power generation equipment that would have been common to the now cancelled French attack-class submarines, a choice Shoebridge describes as technically reckless. A 2020 defense risk assessment cited in the article warned the new layout would have required carving out an additional 8 cubic meters of internal space, demanded extra cooling that risked altering the submarine's acoustic and thermal signature, and used diesel generators that were less effective at clearing toxic gases. The most embarrassing consequence was that the redesign would have forced the submarines to spend more time snorting, rising to periscope depth to run diesel engines. The very vulnerability Australia's leaders had publicly condemned as the fatal flaw of conventional submarines when justifying the pivot to nuclear propulsion under AUKUS. Despite the cancellation of the attack-class program in 2021, Defence never fully reassessed whether pursuing these common systems still made any technical or strategic sense. The plan persisted for years, even after repeated warnings that the engineering challenges were insurmountable within the tight docking schedules. What made the original LOTE plan so technically reckless was that it effectively required cutting open the pressure hulls of the 6 Collins submarines to yank out the old main motors and diesel generators and force in the new French-designed replacements. The extra 8 cubic meters demanded by the new equipment meant that simply sliding components through existing hatches was impossible, so the entire internal arrangement would have to be gutted, and the hull itself sliced apart and then welded back together in a complex high-risk surgical procedure. Submarine engineers know that any cut into a pressure hull compromises its structural integrity and necessitates years of recertification, making this a breathtakingly expensive and dangerous gamble for boats that needed to stay operational. When the scaled-back strategy was finally adopted, this massive hull surgery was simply abandoned, and the boats were left with their original propulsion systems still intact. The irony is that after years of planning and nearly $700 million spent, the only thing achieved was proving that the submarines were better off never being cut open at all. The audit report documents that senior defense officials were warned as early as 2019 by the hand-picked Submarine Advisory Committee that the LOTE redesign was the biggest challenge facing the submarine capability and that its scope was incompatible with planned maintenance timelines. By mid-2023, the same committee advised naval and departmental leadership that the proposed work added technical risk rather than resolving scheduling constraints. These warnings were not passed on to government ministers in a timely way, and Defence did not present any comprehensive reassessment or alternative options, even after the French submarine deal was cancelled. Shoebridge contends that this pattern amounts to a culture of concealment, and he highlights that some of the senior figures responsible have since been promoted or given prestigious postings, including the departmental secretary who became ambassador to the United States, and the former Navy capability manager who later rose to become chief of the Defense Force. No one has faced public consequences for the years of squandered spending and strategic drift. The most damaging consequence of the LOTE affair is the shadow it casts over Australia's readiness to participate in the AUKUS nuclear submarine program, arguably the most complex defense enterprise the nation has ever attempted. Shoebridge argues that if the defense establishment cannot honestly and competently manage a mechanical upgrade of 6 conventional submarines it has operated for nearly 3 decades, Its capacity to build, operate and steward nuclear-powered boats will rightly be questioned by its American and British partners. The audit report is now a public document that reveals an organization more focused on protecting its internal processes than on delivering safe and effective capability, a reality that AUKUS partners will not ignore. With the Collins fleet now facing inevitable fragility and the possibility of early retirements before any replacement is ready, Australia risks a real capability gap at a time of intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific. The alarm bells Shoebridge sounds are not a prediction that AUKUS will fail outright, but a warning that without a fundamental reform of the defense bureaucracy's culture of over-optimism and poor accountability, the same patterns of mismanagement could easily infect the far larger nuclear submarine undertaking.